Yesterday evening, I just got tucked up for bed, and something flashed past my screen, and I saw that Fender are basically in October releasing the Fender 59 Bassman Tweed Tone Master. And there's some good news about this. There's some interesting news. I kind of wanted to talk about it because I thought it's kind of interesting. But would you pay $1,500 for a digital modeling amp? I guess that's the real question here. So the good news with this is that Fender, it appears, have been listening and have added an effects loop to the digital amp. So they're now starting to stray, I guess, a bit away from what the formula originally was of these things. So the Tone Master series in general, I think, has been pretty well received, especially when you consider that the pricing of it is often double, three times even what the equivalent digital amps, modeling amps, would be from other companies. They've added that effects loop, which I guess could make this potentially a candidate for some people that are already in the modeling world. There's some stuff about this which just seems to kind of confuse me though. You've got the XLR out. I've had a Fender Super Reverb Tone Master, and my initial impressions were like, oh, that's pretty good. However, I've never played a real Super Reverb. The other thing that made me think about this again was that I did a comparison with the Boss Katana on the clean setting through the same cab, through a Fender Vibreverb super posh Fender tube amp. If I put both the Katana and the Fender through the same cab, essentially I found those to be really close. I think closer than I suggest that you maybe check out this video. That Pedal Show did a comparison of the two deluxe reverbs. One was just the 65 reissue, and the other was the Tone Master. And if you listen to them on that, they are certainly not saying that they're indistinguishable. And I'll show you this tiny clip here where they're both going through the same speaker. And I guess you can draw your own conclusions from that. yeah, I was able to get the Katana sounding closer to the Vibe Reverb even, and those are two kind of unrelated amps through the same cab. So interesting to me that it wasn't actually that close. So the kind of selling point, I think, of the Tone Masters initially was that a digital version, which is, they say, kind of virtually indistinguishable. I think in A/B tests that you see online, then I've not seen a blind test done, but certainly that pedal show where they were given both amps by Fender. I know they potentially have a bias towards the tube amps, but I think that was a fairly, like, giving it a fair shot. It's quite different in that video, right? And not necessarily in a terrible way. It's just not indistinguishable. For instance, it seemed like the deluxe reverb didn't really do the same kind of breakup thing as the other one. It just got kind of louder and stayed cleaner for longer. And also the mid-range, they were saying, sounded quite different, which I respect their opinion on that stuff, and it's interesting to see them even give a digital thing a go. But yeah, at the end of that video, they basically concluded that the deluxe reverb reissue was the way that they would go. And that, to me, it's also, I'm as much into modelling as the next guy, unless the next guy is Mick from that pedal show, in which case I'm much more into modelling. But I think that the way that this stuff hinges is that generally a Boss Katana is, for instance, half the price or less than half the price of a tube amp equivalent, or the Line 6 Catalyst. And the trade-off normally is that you get some more convenient features, you get a lighter cab, and you also have more versatility in terms of sounds. Now, what the Fender Tone Master stuff does is kind of gets most of that, kind of kicks it out and says, well, we're going to do one thing pretty well. And crucially, put it into a really good cabinet with proper speakers. I think that is the master stroke from Fender. I'm not sure that their digital modelling is up to par with someone like Fractal, Line 6 Neural DSP. If you watch like Leon Todd doing some comparisons of the Tone Master Pro with those other units, there's very much a gap in terms of accuracy, I would say. And it did come out that there was some reasons for this to be happening, that Fender were talking in the forums about how they were doing stuff, as well as Cliff from Fractal talking about how they were doing stuff. So there were legitimate reasons as for why the Fender models would be less accurate in general, and one of them was that they're baking the impedance and speaker load into an IR, which is a very unconventional way of doing things. Anyway, all of those details aside, for me, what really doesn't work about this is the value proposition, where essentially, I could go out and buy a Fender FR12, which is, I think, one of Fender's best products. It's fantastically well built compared to the competition, like a Line 6 Power Cab. This, I think, is much more solidly made. It's basically made like one of their amps, and that's kind of like a £400-500 piece of gear. I don't think it works so much if essentially your digital modelling version, which we're not used to paying a premium for, is like as expensive or nearly as expensive as the actual tube versions. Something about that doesn't work for me. I don't know if that's just me or if that's your experience too. And I know that there are definitely people out there gigging. In particular, I think the Tone Master Deluxe Reverb, people seem to like that one. The difference with the Super Reverb, I think, was that the cabinet was plywood, whereas the other ones, I think, are pine, which could be a difference. But in the room, the Super Reverb was pretty cool. Jake gigged it live and kind of really wasn't happy with how it took pedals. And I found on Reddit a guy who's a big fan of the Tone Master stuff, but said that like reviewers aren't touching this aspect of it, which was that actually, like, it doesn't seem to take drive pedals super well, or that was kind of his takeaway from it. The other point is that really, it's DSP stuff that we could be having, like, Fender actually making it possible to run each of the amps through the same stuff. They all have a really similar power amp section, right? And for that reason, it feels a little bit like, well, why couldn't I, in the Fender Tone Master Twin, run the Tweed, etc.? If you're really bought into the idea that Fender are doing digital modeling better than anyone else, then it makes more sense to go down the route of the Fender Tone Master Pro, which has, and they've confirmed this on the forums, all the same models as are in their Tone Master amps. So if you're going to do that, then wouldn't it make more sense just to go down the Tone Master Pro route? But I guess the simplicity of it. However, yeah, I just think when you see them side by side with the real amps, do they necessarily sound exactly like them? Not necessarily. Do they sound pretty good in their own right? They seem to. But are they expensive when you consider that you could be getting an actual Fender tube amplifier? Like me and Jake just bought one for £850. I can get an actual deluxe reverb. You could buy an actual Fender Twin and have a spinal surgery for, you know, £600 to £800, £900. You can get these amps in the UK even. I guess in America for you guys, it's probably even easier to find kind of this stuff. Like a reissue Fender Bassman 59, I think they're £2,000 in the UK. I don't know. I'd be looking for a used one of those, or a Fender Princeton, or all of these things. I think for me still, if I'm going to go modelling, I'm going to go modelling. If I'm going to go with an amp, I'm going to buy an actual tube amp, I think still. Even as someone who's fully like in deep in the modelling world, I think shelling out £1,500 for a digital modelling amplifier, to me, doesn't seem like that makes a lot of sense. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. We'll be grabbing one. As I say, I think it's cool to see the effects return and the effects loop included, as that is kind of like a step in a different direction. And if anything, I'd like to see companies influenced by Fender in this sense, that putting these digital amps into like a decent cabinet with some decent speakers, I think that might be the way to get a little bit more uptake in this space. But certainly Fender are doing some interesting things, I think.